Global economic collapse is a certainty, and some economists argue about whether this will be an inflation or a deflation. So today we will discuss exactly that, and I will show you why we'll have both. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. I'm going to break this down in simple terms so we can get to the bottom of this. Let's look at this section from my book, When Inflation Just Isn't Enough, Hyperinflation. Hyperinflation is essentially inflation on steroids. It occurs when the currency loses value fast because of extreme money printing. And the reason why this happens oftentimes is because the governments become desperate. Their policies aren't working. They're printing up some money. They're lowering the interest rates, and it simply isn't doing enough to jumpstart the economy. So here, hyperinflation has occurred countless times all over the world and documented as far back as ancient Greece. It can happen very quickly, catching citizens by surprise. Then I said that they run the printing press into unlimited quantities. So what I wanted to note is that this can happen very fast. I wrote about it in my book, and I'll show you exactly how that happens and how quick this really does occur. So that's the hyperinflation side of it, and we're going to get into more of this in a moment. So let's go on to this here. Now we look at the inflation statistics that the government shows us, and they are completely fraudulent. We're looking at them being near zero. How exactly do they get to these numbers? Well, if you just remove anything that's on the rise, and it will basically show you that, of course, everything is very fine at the moment. But when you include things like electricity and like food prices, you have a very different number. And this is shown right here. This chart happens to be from my book, but the statistics are from the BLS and Shadow Stats. And you can see how different that gray line over there is the real inflation rates, and the black line is the fake number that they provide. So this is looking at about 11% on the inflation rate, and that was a couple years back. But if you were to take these statistics and even look at the current ones, you're looking at practically the same number. And what happens here is that they manipulate the statistics to keep everything downward. So when we need to understand about inflation, it doesn't necessarily mean what the government is putting out there. You need to understand that they play with the statistics in order to keep you subdued so that you're not getting upset. But the way to look at it is most importantly with your food and electricity prices. These are obviously the most essential things that you have that do cost a considerable amount of your income. So something to pay attention to. This right here is an example. I continuously see numbers that don't really match up, but I chose this one here from goldsilver.com, and it's talking about Weimar Germany. So we're looking at 1923. Imagine this, before the Great Depression here, and you have France and Belgium invading and occupying the industrial heartland of Germany. In the meantime, the German government puts its printing presses into overdrive. Now get this, they printed 50 quadrillion marks a day by November of the same year. Within 1 year, they went from being a relatively normal amount of money in circulation to 50 quadrillion marks in a single day. People are wondering why we're not seeing inflation yet, or supposedly not seeing inflation yet. Just wait, because they're going to take advice from the Weimar Republic, and we're going to see quadrillions of money being printed in all of these countries. Look at Japan. They have only printed trillions of yen. Just wait. The quadrillions are on their way. I assure you, the trillions are nothing compared to what we will see. Look at this right here. You can see the stats for yourself in such a considerably short amount of time. You know, this chart here is from the Business Insider. But essentially, it goes to show you how things go from normal to insane to destroyed in a matter of moments. You won't be able to react in a hyperinflation. Even if you look at nations that experience high levels of inflation today, you will see that they are basically the average citizen does not react in time. They end up going out there and just buying anything they can. They buy cars, they buy televisions, whatever it can, because their currency is devaluing so rapidly. And that is not a good thing. You need people to have that stability so that they can get into future investments. They do not want to have this trouble and worry on their mind, because it ruins everything throughout the whole business world, throughout the economy. So I just wanted to show you how fast things can escalate in a hyperinflation or even in a high inflation. So now we sort of turn the page right here, and I've referred to this before, but in 2002 Ben Bernanke had a speech. I definitely would recommend that you read this speech, because it tells exactly the Federal Reserve's plan in Ben Bernanke's own words. This was actually prior to him being the chairman. But he said this: the U.S. government has a technology called a printing press that allows it to produce as many U.S. dollars as it wishes at no cost. So right there, they are saying what they're going to do. Now look at this. He even referred to Milton Friedman's statement about a helicopter drop of money as a measure to fight deflation. So what's he saying? We will print money in unlimited quantities to support the economy when it needs it. And that is something that they've been doing so far. They haven't gone overboard compared to what we've seen in the Weimar Republic. Yes, it is impossible to pay back. Don't even get me started on that. What I'm trying to say is that compared to where it's going to go, it has quite a while to go. The fact remains is that they will get to that point. Now, speaking of deflation, let's discuss what that is for a moment here. And obviously a good example of this is the Great Depression from 1929 to 1923. Real gross domestic product per capita plummeted nearly 30%. And the unemployment rate soared from about 3% to over 25%. Now, once again, just like the inflation statistics, the unemployment statistics are fraudulent as well. But let's look at these numbers right here, 3% to 25%. If we ever saw a dramatic increase like that, there would be mass chaos on the street. The way they're able to prevent this from occurring today is the social programs such as the food stamp program and so on. You will see these type of programs putting a larger burden on the government than was possible back in those days, but at the same time simply robbing from the future. And another thing is the GDP here obviously being a huge problem. When real wealth pulls out of the system, it's very hard to put that fake wealth back in, because it doesn't exactly go where you want it to. It can go overseas. It can go in the wrong assets. It can go in the right assets, but they're not able to really control it so well. They do so with the stock market because they give central bank incentives, because the elite have incentives in order to buy up certain types of assets that you and I simply cannot get into at this time. Now, everyone's always talking about the Great Depression of 1929 and so on, but what about before that? In fact, there has been talk that prior to the Great Depression, we had depressions every single time before that. Crashes were always called depressions or panics, and they did not want that to be something for the future. They changed the term used, and that's why we have recessions. We do not have depressions anymore, even though they technically mean the exact same thing. Right here, it was accepted that the period of the so-called Great Depression between 1873 and 1896 saw substantial improvements in real wages for those unemployed, primarily as a result of falls in the prices of foodstuffs and other imported goods. This is exactly the reason I wanted to mention this information here, that deflation can in fact be a good thing in certain cases. Right here, in a way, it did benefit those people who were employed because things became cheaper. You could buy up shares of the stock market for cheaper because, in fact, the prices were falling down. Food prices are falling down. You could afford to buy more. You could afford to buy a steak dinner and not have to eat the basic potatoes, for example. You could afford more things that those previous to that could not afford. So I'm always getting these questions here, and I'm trying to answer them as I move through the this video here, because this is part of the e-course that I'm developing here, and I'm doing it live as I speak here. And essentially what I've found is that people are interested in the fact of whether it will be a deflationary environment or an inflationary environment. So I'll get onto that in a moment, and essentially wanted to note, because many people are curious, what exactly is bad about a deflation? Well, when we have a deflation in real wages, when we have it in a person's income, that's when it's bad. When you have a deflation in food prices, for example, it may not necessarily be bad. Now, where it is a bad case is with, for example, farms. They're not able to make as much profit. What about the mining sectors and the other sectors like this that rely on high prices in order to keep working? So it is a balance that does form, and it will happen in cycles along the way. However, if they are kept artificially high or artificially low, this causes disruptions and distortions which will affect people's jobs, their employment. It will affect all the way down the line throughout the economy. The government believes that they can manipulate this up and down successfully. However, that is definitely not the case. Look at this right here. This is the M3 money supply, courtesy of Shadow Stats, and essentially wanted to show you something here. Now, in the financial crisis, we saw where it peaked out and then it drops down significantly over to the middle of 2010, let's say. If they experience a drop like this, and a drop that continues to go down, we will have the printing presses igniting to levels we have never seen before in the future. Once the real money pulls out of the system, you will have the Federal Reserve and all other central banks moving in. And this will be the biggest bout of money printing you have ever seen in history. They will do so globally. There will be no country left behind. They will all do this in a race to the bottom. This is the M3 money supply, very important to look at. And if you haven't already, definitely look at shadowstats.com. They tell the truth. So we're going to move on to this one last thing. Real median household income in the United States. Just take a look at this. From the year 2000 up until the year 2013, we're looking at this household income. What does this mean? It shows that we are facing a decline in people's actual wealth over the years. It's continuously declining. The stock market has been rising, but we see this right here, actual wealth, actual people's income is declining. Why? Because they tend to find themselves in more debt. The things that are the most important cost too much, like food and electricity prices. So they're not able to basically keep up with the rising prices simply because of the distortions that are caused in this economy by all of their doings that they occur in the government as well as with the central banks. Now, once again, I would just reiterate that I believe we will face a deflationary environment because real money is pulling out of the system. That's the deflation. When this begins to occur, you're going to have the central banks come into the economy and begin to ramp up the printing presses to the absolute maximum. In doing so, they're going to take their currency and they're going to make it into confetti. Now I'll leave that there. What I will add in addition to that is that the governments will come together in emergency meeting where they'll have the IMF and the UN and the World Bank and all of the other technocrats and all the other elite of the world will gather together, and they will say, what do we have to do to save the economy? Please give us any answers. The government will come out there and say, look, we don't need our Congress and our parliaments to act. We'll just cite it into law. Whatever it is, we need to fix it. It's becoming a disaster. All countries are falling, and there's going to be a hyperinflation worldwide. and they will create a new monetary system. They did this multiple times before. They effectively did it in 1971 with Nixon pulling the world essentially off the gold standard. They did this back in the Bretton Woods Agreement 1944, if my memory serves me correctly. They did so prior to that many, many times. So what we will have is a similar happening that will occur, and this will be the start of a new monetary system where I believe there will be some sort of currency or some sort of asset backing the whole world's monetary supply. And what that will do is have the technocratic elite in control of our currencies that we use today. See, we'll be using necessarily the same dollars, perhaps digital forms or paper currency. However, we will be backed up, or so they say backed, by this new currency system, for example, like the IMF's SDR, or perhaps they'll create a new one. The fact remains is that the crisis does occur simply because they already have a solution that they want to provide. Sometimes it takes them 50 years, 100 years, or even more to implement it, but as long as they get to that goal, they continue step by step to erode on our liberty and on our sovereignty. And this is taking place right now before our very eyes. The solution is provided, and they are going towards that, taking it step by step. If you found this video informative, please give me a thumbs up. I want to create so many more of these educational type of videos. Remember that the Money GPS isn't just about the news, but I want to bring information to the people, break it down, make it simple for you so that we can really learn and begin at the very bottom. Schools have never taught this information, and it is my duty, my obligation to bring this to as many people as I possibly can. Don't forget to become an insider. The Insiders is where I give out all my best intel for free, and that is available at themoneygps.com. You just scroll down to the bottom, fill in your email address, and you get occasional emails from me with good, short, concise info.